Welcome back, everyone. This week, we're going to ask and answer in part the question, is Joe Biden good for oil? Or you might ask alternatively, is Joe Biden not as bad for oil as what the prevailing narrative suggests? We can all laugh, unless you're not one of those who can laugh, at such memes like the following, and we might have a couple more in the video later on. So, drilling for American oil and gas? No. Importing Chinese solar panels made by slave labor? Yes. Now, what he's referencing, if you're unaware, is the Uyghur camps that allegedly are used in West China, where the Chinese Muslim population is. If you're unaware, Google it. If you don't care, then don't Google it. So, let's jump into this. Is Biden good for oil? Or at least not as bad as what the prevailing narrative suggests? Well, oh, no, this isn't it. No, this is Mexico. Oh, no, that's Canada, down and to the right. Huh. Germany? No, Germany's falling too. Boy, Colombia, Chile, Azerbaijan. Is that even a country? Oh, here we go. United States crude oil. Well, that can't be right. No. I mean, oil is becoming scarce here in the U.S. of A. Biden's removing it all. He's canceling it. I mean, it was campaign speech, and that's what people in my echo chamber have been pounding into my head. This chart can't be right. That can't be right. There we go. Yeah. That should fit a person's ego-invested, cherished, and closely held narrative. Because, after all, numerous people I talk to and see and listen give this kind of impression, don't they? So, interesting. Here we go. We haven't had a refinery built in the United States since the 1970s, CEO Mike Wirth said in an interview on Bloomberg TV. By the way, this was a couple of years ago. My personal view is there will never be another new refinery built in the United States. Thankfully, there's ways that one can come across information if they so choose to open their eyes and expand their horizon of understanding. When was the last refinery built in the United States? As of January 1st, 2023, there were 129 operable refineries in the U.S. The newest refinery in the United States is the Texas International Terminals, which started operating in February of 2022. Well, that's not right. Maybe they're using a different definition of built. Maybe that was an expansion. However, the newest refinery with significant downstream unit capacity is Marathon's facility in Garyville, Louisiana. That facility came online in 1977. And by the way, what prompted this video actually was me hearing from numerous people, friends, colleagues, mentors, people I follow online, social media, on and on. For years, I've been hearing that we haven't built a refinery since 1970-ish. And I believed it. So for a couple of years, have had this thought in my head that, man, wouldn't it be a good, interesting arbitrage opportunity to produce natural gas in the U.S. and then sell it abroad to where natural gas is a higher price? Like, this seems like a pretty good arbitrage opportunity. But then I was like, well, there's no refinery capacity, because that's what all the ideologues and people in my echo chamber have said. And all the people who've also said we haven't had a refinery built since the 70s seemingly always forget to mention expanded capacity that's been created, or technological innovation, and so on and so forth. It's always this very narrow and one-sided, bigoted representation of how the U.S. oil industry is going down the toilet, and And well, that's interesting because we're going to get into some charts. If the one I already showed you wasn't enough, here is what people mean by none. So seemingly 14 and 0 are the same number. That's interesting. And then essentially capacity worth an additional Corpus Christi worth of LNG production. It's not the same, but kind of puts things in a very vague and ambiguous understanding. This is the new refineries: 1980, 86, 87, 92, 93, 98, 2015, 2015, 2015, 2015, 2017, 2019, 2021, 2022. And the amount that you're ignored or annoyed by me going through every single operating start date is about 1/100th of how annoyed I am of the numerous people telling me that a refinery hasn't been built. They didn't say a meaningfully sized refinery. They didn't contextualize it anyway. And another interesting thing is you see highlighted in blue the majority of these, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, so 8 out of 14, were first operated in a Democratic year. Now, since we all know how long it takes stuff to get built, I did not research, because I don't care enough, to find out when all of these were passed. Were they passed in Republican presidencies and it took this long to develop it and so on and so forth. And so when they finally operated, it was in a Democratic year, because it's not like it was signed off, final investment decisions were made, and it was constructed and everything all within a year. So I'm not that naive. That would be interesting if somebody knew, because I would think that the Republicans probably permitted such things and allowed such things, and then they just so happen to get built in Democratic presidents. I just don't know. But on we go. So 14 is what no looks like. This reminds me of a story of me asking an ex-girlfriend if she quit smoking. Fun little story. She says she quit smoking. I said, okay. That's good, you know. It's good all around. And about a month later, I found out that she was smoking. And I said to her, I said, I thought you quit smoking. And she said, no, I radically cut back. And I was like, then why did you tell me you quit smoking? To quit something is to not do it, not reduce consumption. You didn't say reduce consumption or the other million ways that you could have been honest in your communication. You said you quit. And then, you know, she got all upset because I was calling her out on her lie. And I said to her, it seemed like she was struggling to understand why I might be upset by the deception and the intention to deceive. And I said, well, how would you feel if I said I don't cheat on you, but I only cheat on you a minimal amount of the time? Because according to your definitions of these words, you're saying to do something only a fraction of the time that you used to do something, and or to only minimally engage in an activity from time to time is the same as not doing something. So I guess it's okay for me to tell you that I'm not cheating and then go cheat, but not too often. And as you imagine, that didn't work out well for me at all. So, and of course, the whole point of the metaphor and example was to get her to understand where I was coming from, but that's not really how communication works. But back to the video at hand. Hopefully you enjoyed that story. If not, then, well, don't know what to tell you. Another problem is that this information I'm providing and will be providing is it hurts the evil Democrats narrative. Because if evil Democrats won't allow new refineries, then how did all those get there? And how have expansions been allowed? Does the logical extension of that might mean that the Democrats aren't evil? But I'm sure there'll just be a thesis creep and like, well, they took bribes or they couldn't, they didn't have majority rule of the decision. There's always a reason why the Democrats remain evil. And it's interesting because, well, Democrats do the same for Republicans. So dang Biden and his oil-hating policies. Here we are, U.S. number of operable refineries at 129. And is that a coincidence that this chart back in 1980, the number of refineries was 300? And is it any coincidence that Joe Biden joined the Senate in the early to mid 1970s? Bet he has something to do with this. And look at this. U.S. refinery production down 5.5% since Trump left office. Oil refineries are down by over half, by the way. So oil refineries down by half. 300 down to 129. That's cut over in half. Yet, oil refinery production is up by 33%. Well, how is that possible? And, well, what's this? U.S. field production of crude oil? Oh, well, I've learned that from all the FinTwit hustlers and grifters and maybe won't go so far as to say con artists, but degenerates, maybe that's a good word. They've really taught me that if you want your audience to know something, you need to steer them in the right direction by messing with the vertical or the horizontal axes of the graph or adjusting time frames. So let's try to do this to make the Biden haters who say that he's destroying the oil industry, unlike Azerbaijan or Chile or Colombia or Mexico or Canada, in which you actually see real meaningful results of oil industry destruction, which just means we'll just gerrymander and alter our definition to force fit it into some ideologically reassuring fashion. But let's try to manipulate this chart and zoom in. Well, that doesn't look helpful. Actually, this shows that U.S. field production of crude oil is at an all-time high. Yeah, that didn't help. That didn't help. Let's see. Oh, here we go. He's trying to stop offshore. But is he? As a behaviorist, I like to pay attention to actions. So U.S. Interior Department plans 3 offshore oil gas leases sales over the next 5 years. Offshore leasing plan to become effective in 60 days. This is the fewest offshore leases ever in history, as many titles are saying. But, okay, why is federal offshore Gulf of Mexico field production of crude oil close to an all-time high? Like, is that residual runoffs from other policies? Like, I don't know. And notice I'm asking you a lot of questions. Some of them are rhetorical. Some of it's hoping you prompt thought. Some of it is trying to afflict the comfort the afflicted type way of thinking. Some of it is to wake people up and actually give them something to think about, because you really have to wonder, looking at these charts, and most people can't. They don't. I say, prove me wrong. Okay, you say Biden, and then you'll talk about Anwar, and you'll talk about this and that. But insofar as production of these things go, they're looking great, especially relative to, well, all the countries I listed at the beginning. And then the worst atrocity of them all, Biden is trying to ruin your cooking by banning stoves. Biden America, no more gas stoves. Even though that's kind of a misrepresentation and bastardization of what he's attempting. Now, you could say that that's where it's going, and probably, but to say no more gas stoves is not true. It's not like some totalitarian regime is going house to house, door to door, disconnecting your gas lines and stuff. I mean, it's such a blown out, disproportionate representation of reality. It's absurd and does a disservice because there's a lot of intelligent things that could be said. You know, this is a foot in the door technique to desensitize people. Funny, I barely hear people actually articulate any of the ideas that could be actually articulated in an intelligent fashion that represents reality in a proportionate fashion, as well as takes you down an abstract conceptual rabbit hole of the implications of these behaviors. But instead, people want to sum it up in some stupid ass meme and say, Biden bad, no gas stove, oil no going down. It's like, well, you're not going to convince anyone. Like, that kind of rhetoric is meant for virtue signaling fools to validate themselves to the peers and let them know which tribe they belong to. And it's not how you win anyone over to your side, and it's sure as hell not a way you have a discussion with anyone who might disagree with you on a couple of points. So, even though he's banning gas, it looks like U.S. natural gas marketed production is at an all-time high. And a good one at that. Like, so he's banning, so he's cool with banning all the gas stoves, but he's also cool with allowing all-time high production. Like, what's going on there? Then we have LNG exports reached an all-time high under the Biden administration. So all-time high, so they're under the Biden administration, Bidenomics. Biden has allowed all-time high of oil production, all-time high of natural gas production, all-time high of LNG exports. And then one might be clever and say, well, Biden doesn't control these things. But if it was, if it was his wish, he sure would run the companies and industries in the ground. Like the same guy who was begging the oil producers to produce more oil because of the quote-unquote Putin price hikes? You mean that jaw-boning, saber-rattling, brinkmanship, flip-flopping individual? That guy? If it was his will, he would drive it in the ground? Like, maybe his puppet masters, but not Biden. Like, get your story straight. And then it's always kind of funny and that, Trump was going to save coal, and yet here we look at it. Coal production decreased under his presidency, and Biden is supposed to end oil, and yet oil production has increased under his administration. It's almost like a whole lot of people say a whole lot of things, but they really don't act on much of it, and much of it's over-promising and under-delivering and saying whatever is immediately gratifying and expedient at that time, and that they're pretty much just shells of themselves and clowns to entertain you. Like, I guess not. I guess that couldn't be the case. Just the Democrats, And no, I haven't forgot about such things like the Mountain Valley Pipeline that's had nothing but red tape and protests and permits revoked and prolonged and delayed and on and on and on it's gone. So yeah, they're making things more difficult than other people, but well, the charts I showed you should also suggest that even if they're making things difficult, like, we're producing at all-time highs, so I don't know, like, you tell me. And then the funny thing is as I noted earlier about the podcast people, numerous people I've listened to on podcasts and just in my echo chamber, which you could say is a Republican libertarian echo chamber. I mean, that's the finance industry in general, outside of these financial advisors, those, get yourself a nice 30-year-old associate bachelor university indoctrinated financial advisor to help you with your 401k. Now you're running a risk of a corrupt and pathologized individual who you probably shouldn't trust with your money and will help you compound it at less than a rate of inflation and or the S&P. But I digress on that. So it's not just the people in my echo chamber suggesting that an oil refinery hasn't been built. Yet again, no one seems to want to contribute all the expansions that's happened. That's always left out the picture. But here I came across this on Quora. And the last full-scale grassroots refinery. See how that's qualified? That's different than saying the last refinery. Just like quitting smoking and reducing one's smoking is different. Or your mechanic saying, hey, your vehicle's ready, why don't you come in? Then you come in and they're like, hey, yeah, it's going to be an hour. We just have to put the tires back on and change the oil. And then you'll be like, but you said it was ready. And it's like, oh, yeah, we don't actually use words based upon their definition. We just kind of use it whenever it's flattering and expedient for us, and we change definitions, whether it helps us or doesn't. It's like, oh, okay, I understand. And that's what people do. So it is nice to see the last full-scale grassroots refinery. And then this other comment says the reality is that nobody has built a genuine oil refinery. It'd be nice, like, what do you mean by genuine? And then the final one is a guy just being an ass, and that's the risk you run. And I'm running that in this video because really, I'm actually quite butthurt about everyone. I don't generally speak in absolute terms. So when I speak in absolute terms, then I actually mean it. I have all the tweets I've read, podcasts I've listened to, people I've spoken with, they all say the same thing. Haven't built a refinery since 1970. So then that just kind of quelled my exploration onto ways to take advantage of natural gas prices in the export industry, and because we must not have capacity. That's what everybody wants to tell you. The story goes, those damn Democrats won't let us build refineries, and therefore we're struggling to produce. And it's like, we are building refineries. Production is up 33% since half the refinery's been decommissioned or something's happened. And we've been adding on a lot, which we'll get to in a moment, a lot, define a lot however you wish, of additional capacity. So, now here's another. Total number of leases in effect. Oh, look at that. Number's been dropping since Biden's been in administration. That'd be the top column if you can read it. Fiscal year 2019, 38,000. Now in fiscal year 2022, 34,000. Oh, yeah, that Biden, he must be sneaking it in, and it's cutting back on the oil and gas industry by reducing the total number of leases in effect. Oh, what's this? Zooming out? Fiscal year 2008, 55,000. And what you notice is that practically every year it goes down and down and down and down. Now, I don't know what it did before 2008, but now you can say that, I guess it's Obama. It stayed more flattish under Trump, but it still went down. So, And this is what I mean by keeping constant your comparisons and controlling for variables. So then you might have to ask, so was Trump also cutting back? Or is there a confounding variable at play? Some spurious correlation? Like, what's going on? Well, that would require a person go beyond their initial thought and actually have some critical analysis. And no, I haven't forgot the garbage that Biden said years ago. But what people do is they love to hold on to their narrative and then refuse to switch sides since they've already virtue signaled to the peers and concretized their belief and image, and they definitely couldn't adopt a more sophisticated understanding of matters. Here we go. This is from the Way Back When, or where that website that freezes stuff from back in the day. So the Biden plan for a clean energy revolution and environmental justice, whatever the hell environmental justice means. Protecting America's natural treasuries by permanently protecting the Arctic National Wildlife Refuge and other areas. That's, ANWR. That's the one everybody goes on and on about, because why wouldn't they? It validates their a priori notions. And other areas impacted by President Trump's attack on federal lands and water. Beautiful. Like, not other presidents too. And his attack on lands and waters, which I guess means that Biden's also guilty of attacking lands and waters. So that's interesting. Establishing national parks and monuments that reflect America's natural heritage. Banning new oil and gas permitting on public lands. Now that's interesting, banning new oil and gas permitting. The same thing is kind of going on with Panama and the first quantum copper mine, and how in legislation they so far have banned new mining. But that doesn't mean that the mines right now, it's like people confused because they're not smart, banning new with allowing old to continue. So that's interesting. And so banning new oil and gas permitting on public lands and waters. We just showed the chart. They're allowing 3 leases for the next few years. So failed at that. Failed at banning new oil and gas permitting on public lands. Like, what kind of an audacious, foolish statement. Like, if I was a Democrat and I was like thinking about this guy and I see him say that, like, what a blatant lie. Like, really? You're supposed to be representing me and then just blatantly lying to my face? But that's what people like, so yeah, whatever. And establishing target programs to enhance reforest state, blah, blah, blah. So, that's kind of funny. Banning new oil and gas permitting on public lands. So, despite his jawboning, how do you explain this? Biden administration oil gas drilling approval outpaces and stomps Trump by 34%. Biden granted more oil and gas drilling permits than Trump. Biden hands out more permits to drill for oil than Trump did. Like, interesting, yeah? It's almost like there's a massive divergence in discontinuity between what people say and what they do. Just because he's over there running his mouth, saying cute little things, talking down oil and gas, they should be happy gas went to $120. Why? Because that makes it more cost competitive for solar and wind and all this other non-cost effective productions of energy to be more cost competitive. If these people really wanted solar and wind to take hold, they should be cheering oil going to $500 a barrel. Like, that would incentivize people to switch from oil to wind and solar, wouldn't it? Just like when people switch or companies switch from nat gas to coal based upon price. Like, you think they'd want that, but oh my God, $4 a gallon at a pump, an additional, $14 a week. It's destroying me. It's like, well, I mean, millions of people it probably is, but that's a whole nother point. That's Bidenomics working for you. So here's oil and gas drilling permits approved on federal land. So that's interesting. I think the chart stops 21, 22. I don't know where it's at for 23. And then this good old one. Biden banning the Keystone Pipeline. You know how many times I've heard someone say that? The media lies to you unless they're telling you what it is you want to hear. And then it's the truth, right? Biden foolish sabotage of the Keystone Pipeline. Keystone Pipeline canceled after Biden revokes key permit. Keystone Pipeline canceled after Biden's blocked permit. Blah, 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 blah. But then it's like, huh, that's interesting. Like, he blocked? Like, how is a pipeline over a decade old transporting hundreds of thousands of barrels a day canceled? Oh, because some words mean words for other words. The Keystone XL. That's just way too much for anybody to add to be correct in their speech. Especially when there's actually something called the Keystone Pipeline. To add XL is exhaustive. Now you could say, well, everybody knows it was the XL pipeline that's canceled, not the actual Keystone Pipeline itself. And the answer is wrong again. Way to fail critical thinking. Way to underestimate how stupid and ignorant people are. There are a good deal of people that actually think the Keystone Pipeline, the thing that's been in production for over a decade, is canceled. I've talked to people. It's literally happened. No, they weren't trolling me. They're just that ignorant. You have to remember that the majority of voters, I'm just going to put this very simply, are not intelligent people. The average participant is economically and financially illiterate. Like, you're working on different levels. Completely different levels. They just hear Keystone Pipeline. All they know is Keystone Pipeline's been around for a while. Canada to America oil stuff. Why wouldn't you do that? Why are we getting oil from Saudi Arabia, the Middle East? It's dumb. There's a lot of people that don't realize, especially people that don't live in North USA, so the majority of people, but a good portion of that majority doesn't know the difference. And don't think for a second that all those titles just ran out of space to add XL. I mean, it's just more disgusting representation. And back to expansion. So, of course, the narrative also excludes additional capacity added since the 1970s, which would explain much of the unnecessariness of having to build actual new entire refineries. Because fundamentally, if the truth isn't flattering, then you just exclude it, especially if it's condemning. So I'm not going to go over these. You could, do some deep dive research and Google it. Port Arthur, the Marathon, ExxonMobil, Baton Rouge, Valero, Corpus Christi, Phillips 66, Wood River. And some of these added on a little. Some of them added on a substantial amount. But funny how this always gets skipped out of the news and out of the media and out of my echo chamber. Now, if you're still watching this, I guess I'll sum things up like this. There's a website called, yourpoliticalcompass.com or political compass. If you go to Google, type in political compass, you can take this little test. The point is, 10-15 minute test. It's fun, whatever. But I've taken this test. I mean, it's a pretty picture, that's why I'm showing it. But I've taken other tests. I'm pretty much a centrist. And the problem with being a centrist is, at least when it comes to me, is you end up arguing with everybody because the majority of people aren't centrists, which means that they're ideological, they're bigoted, they're biased to certain extents in certain ways. And so, just like a basic example would be, I might be hanging out with some Democrats, and then they're talking about, how Trump can't do what he says he'll do, and how the wall's not getting built, and blah blah blah, and his failure, and he just lies to people. And then I'll be like, well, yeah, Biden also promised to stop giving new permits to oil and gas. Like, what's your point? They're both liars. But and then if I'm talking to a Republican, then they're talking about how Biden's like blah blah blah, Biden's a liar and jawboner and inept and impotent as a president, not a real man, whatever. I'll be like, you mean the same guy that, like, didn't you vote for somebody who like ran his mouth a lot and didn't carry through with a lot of it, and like the wall that never really got built, and how Mexico was going to pay for it, which like didn't really happen? You mean like that? So that's a good innocent enough example, hopefully not too inflammatory, of my problem. It's like, well, let's keep constant or comparisons and control for variables. Like maybe we could talk about the entity known as president and what is required of a person these days to become a president, which is blowing smoke up a bunch of idiots' butts to trick them into voting for them. But, well, that doesn't do well because that's not really a tribe. Centrist isn't a tribe. And there's a meme, I was going to add it, I can't find it, where the Democrats push a guy. It's a meme where there's a guy standing in the middle between two big crowds, and one of the crowds pushes him and the other crowd catches him. And then overlaid on that is Democrats, Republicans, centrist, and then the Republicans are holding up the centrist. And then the Democrats say, why are you taking their side? And I mean, that really sums up being a centrist, at least for me. So, plus they just... The point of this, though, was I want my echo chamber to not say dumb things, to not say partial things that, as a consequence, aren't real, because it doesn't accurately represent reality to its fullest. And if you find yourself in an argument with someone that's educated, so slim chance of that, they might have some of this information. You might say, yeah, Biden's trying to destroy the oil industry, and they're like, oil production is at an all-time high. How is he just trying but failing immensely? Like what are you talking about? And then the go-to talking point is, well, ANWRs. Like, okay, fine. Like, if we can still be at all-time high oil production and not destroy Alaska, why wouldn't we? And then what's your argument? And that's the thing, is you probably don't have one. And I've taken things out of context. I mean, there's a whole other side, because I actually am generally under the influence that he is, to some extent, definitely not trying to be supportive of the oil and gas industry and trying to wage war and talk about how he's putting them out of production by 2030 and talking about windfall taxes and this and that. It's like, he's definitely not a friend, but when it comes to enemy, yet again, just look, if you want to see incompetence, malevolence, maliciousness, and things like that, go back and look at those charts I showed you of Chile and Azerbaijan and people that just don't have infrastructure, and or Buddy to the north trying to just destroy things. I mean, I would say Trudeau is trying to destroy stuff. I would say the Mexican president is working on things too. And like, out of all the bad actors, like, Biden's really not the worst. Like, and maybe I'm mistaken. You know, I could make an entire video like I just did, but for why he is destroying things. And I could also probably make a video. It'd be tougher for me, both because of my bias as well as the information out there, of him helping the oil industry. And that's where you should be to be educated. And most people aren't. So take that as you will. Ultimately, this is like, hey, sharpen up your argument. And I'll give a final thing, good example, just to trigger people before they leave, if they haven't left already. Is a prime example is during the pandemic, people in my echo chamber would say masks don't work. And then, like, you can't say that. You're making an absolutist, totalitarian statement, which is all-encompassing of every context. It's very easy. All they have to do now is find one data point that disconfirms and contradicts your absolutist statement of masks don't work. And I had this talk, by the way, with numerous people. To to no avail, but that's just how it goes. All they have to do is find one data point. That's why, a kid says, you never do what, or a girlfriend says, you never do what I want. All you have to do is find one example of one time that you did do what they want, and now you've discredited them. You've made them a liar. Of course, it's a sentimental expression that's factually false, but sentimentally true. It's like, that's a great way to have tons of miscommunication and set yourself up for failure. But that's what people do because people are going to people. And so you could say, and work how? Like you have to define work. And when a definition is based upon vague, ambiguous language, it's to your advantage because you can shift the goalpost, but it's also easy for the other person to shift the goalpost. So you could say, masks don't stop the spread. But because the counter argument is actually masks do reduce the viral load, the initial viral load, allowing your immune system time to build up a response to it. And that's a true statement. So you just ruined it. So he's like, work how? Work in reducing the viral load? Or do you mean work in reducing the spread? Because those are two different works. And then there's other kinds of works as well. So like, what do you mean by work? That's begging the question. That's questioning the concept in the statement as much as the statement itself, which I go on and on about. So, here some people are that I did not get along with at all, saying all kinds of retarded, just blatantly retarded, nonsensical garbage in a most absolute pathological, malicious, malevolent, Oedipus mother type way of virtue signaling in a disgusting fashion, saying numerous false things, like so much low-hanging fruit for my echo chamber to pick at. But they're busy saying blatantly false statements themselves. And it's like, oh, good, we're both sides are going to say a bunch of blatantly false statements that are sentimentally true within a very niche context, but generally are false. And then we're going to say that to each. It's like, what? And this is my problem as a centrist. It's like don't make blatantly false statements. Don't be exaggerative in your comments, and add some nuance and clarity and context and say what you mean. And that requires that you work on your ability to articulate your thoughts, which is one reason why I make these videos and write. By the way, I should have said this in the beginning of the video, so oops. In the description, you will see a more articulate and rambling, verbose, as some might call it, deeper dive into my thoughts in the Substack that I published on this topic. And with that, if you're still watching, we're now going to transfer over to the stock portfolio portion, reviewing last week's performance. So let's get into that. Bam. So if you haven't noticed, oil in and of itself has been getting hammered, and as a consequence, oil stocks are getting hammered, and as a consequence of offshore oil stocks being a leveraged play on equities and oil commodity, they have been getting especially hammered. And quite frankly, the Tidewater chart looks like shit. There's a part of me that wants to sell my position and short it, and then with this or short it too, or so. I don't have the cash on hand, but I mean it looks like crap. And I thought that Tuesday, I think since then it fell. I mean it's probably down like 7% or something from when I thought that. I'm like, man, this is not a good looking chart at all. None of them are. Transocean, Valaris, they're not looking good. Just oil charts, equity, it's just not looking good. So there's that. Then DRS, been pretty much in the green on that one. That's my Leonardo, down 3.5%. It got hammered on Thursday, 11%. So this is a problem. And I have a couple names under this condition where you could say that insiders the parent company owns a massive amount of it, and then if they don't trickle out of it, it can really move the stock and pretty much just hammer a stock sideways for years as a consequence by diluting it. So Leonardo, not Leonardo DRS, but actual France Leonardo, I think they sold like, they essentially were selling and diluting the float by 6.5%. So on Friday, I believe it was, DRS opened down 6.5%. Makes sense. You're expanding the float by 6%, so the shares drop by 6%. All makes sense. Well, it closed the day down 11%. Not really sure what that's all about. Overreaction, information I'm unaware of, not really sure. Let's see what's going on. Uranium is now, Sprott Uranium Miners, I should say, is now my top position at 40%. Then SurgePay really has ripped lately, up 28% on that. I must say I did not think that was going to be my second best position for the year because my oil names have been hit. Transocean, I'm down 5.5%. Been dead money all year, essentially. Even though it was up, it was down, sideways, back to sideways. So a year wasted in money on that. There's something I wanted to say. What was it? Oh, I know what it was. So uranium's an interesting thing. So pretty much from January 1st to July, mid-July, Sprout Physical Uranium Trust went nowhere. Okay? Went nowhere. And since then, so call it August, September, October, November, we'll call it 4 months, maybe 5 months, however you want to measure it, it's gone up a lot. I can't remember which chart I looked at, if it was URNM or if it was Sprout Physical Uranium, but one of them's up 60%. It might be URNM. I can't remember. That's up 60% in 4 months. So nothing. I mean, bouncing around, up 10, down 10, whatever. Nothing for 7 months, 6, 7 months, and then in 3 or 4 months, up 60%. So it's really frustrating. And I say that hoping maybe 2024 is a up year for, unless you bought the offshore names, timed the dips perfectly, and or bought the first couple of weeks of January, you're pretty much sitting sideways. Tidewater, I'm up 8.5%. I think I was up 40, 50% once, but I've bought on pullbacks and therefore higher prices and therefore lower percentage gain. So that's how that goes. And it's a dangerous game to play. And now you see why, because the margin of safety is less. Instead of being down or being up 30% from maybe being up 45%, I'm now up 8.5%. Valaris up 3.5%. Oh, I bought Kodak Gas Services. I don't know if I'll keep it. See what happens. I felt the need to buy something, so I did. So the reason for this video being made, and the one I made a few days ago, the little special video, if you will, was a consequence of me finally realizing the bullshit narrative. I don't know how I've missed the whole LNG move, the export move. Just the whole thing. I've never. Why know why? Time and time again, been warned it's the Widowmaker, and I just kind of stared clear. Like, man, I don't need to involve myself with something called the Widowmaker. so I pretty much steered clear. I didn't realize the refinery lies. Nobody in my echo chamber talked about LNG exports booming, this and that, and it's always been, when it's brought up, when I've heard it, it's talked about a theory, like one day we'll start exporting LNG. You know, it's kind of framed in that light. So I've just missed it, but you know how to play it. It's either through the exporter or through some tangential way, because I don't want the commodity producer. I really don't. I just don't want that. I don't want a commodity producer playing natural gas. So the compressor names have held up well. Like if you look at a EQT or Devon or a couple others like that, Sandridge or Antero Resources, they're up a lot more since, say, the COVID bottom, which is kind of a messed up way to measure things. But from there, they're up a few 100% more than the compressor names. But the compressor names have done well, but a lot of them are LPs, and I don't want to involve with that because in part this channel is about showing new people how to do stuff, and there's costs and distributions and extra tax considerations and extra costs when you pay someone to do your taxes. So this one, and I think there's one other that are compressor plays. Essentially, they rent compressor stations to the natural gas producers to, the gas needs moved down the pipe. So that's what the compressors do, is they move the gas down the pipe, extremely simply put. So see what happens there, up on that. It's funny, LPX, Louisiana Pacific, the home builder thing has just been all over the place. I was up 40% and down like 20%, and now I'm up 7%. And I don't know, this month so far has been by far the largest divergence I've had in relation to the S&P this year, and I think I'm still outperforming the S&P. I'm not sure. Last month took a 5.5% haircut on the portfolio, and then this month I'm actually slightly up. But the problem with that is the S&P's up 10% for the month. So, ouch. That's quite the divergence. So even if I close the month up positive, like relative, like if today was the end of the month, yes, I would technically be positive for the month, which, it could be a lot worse. But yet again, the whole point of this is to beat the benchmark. And I recognize that it's not a month-to-month or week-to-week or day-to-day game, but the whole point of this is to beat the benchmark, because if I can't beat the benchmark, then I might as well just invest in the benchmark. That's, set the ego aside and recognize I suck and, move on and get on with my life. But, so, even though I might be positive, the S&P is, and the thing is, if I'm up 1% for the month and the S&P's up 10% for the month, then that really makes up a lot of lost ground that I've gained on the S&P over the year. That's the problem. I don't care about underperformance for a month. It's that the underperformance is so massive relative to the benchmark that the benchmark has caught up on a lot of lost ground that I've been beating it on through the majority of the year. That's the issue, and we're coming up on a month and a half before the end of the year, and it'd be nice if I could beat the benchmark the first year of this channel, that would, the whole point is to encourage people that it can be done, and that'd be a bad way to close the year. That's for sure. So I'll end it here. Thanks for watching, and until next time.